Women and men of Reddit who were proposed to in public and said no. Why? I was in first grade and asked some pretty girl to marry me. Sadly, she said no. I went on to drink apple juice heavily. Well, I serve at a high-end restaurant in my city, and I've seen multiple proposals over the years, and only one ever said no. It was painful to watch. For the other dining guests as well. This was a young couple, mid-20s. The guy had made notes about his plan on the reservation, so we all knew not to tip her off. They order drinks and an elegant tasting menu, and then he asks. The girl is mortified. We can't hear what she says, but the guy is in shell shock. The strangest part? They sit through the whole experience. This dinner they selected takes at least 90 minutes at a normal pace, spread out over multiple courses. They nibbled, didn't speak, and didn't look at one another. Poor dude put the ring in his pocket, and his eyes looked glassy the whole time. She cried to herself, but was discreet. As I said, freaking painful. It's easy to blame the girl in this situation. I'm sure multiple guests were disgusted with her and how she could be so cavalier. But you know what, frick that. Good for her. This guy seemed overzealous. And if I had to guess, this relationship was less than a year old. Getting married and potential plans for an engagement is something that should be talked about before it happens. And I guarantee this kid just assumed she'd go along with whatever he wanted. She stood her ground and handled it better than I'm sure the vast majority of people in her position would have. I was on my walk home from work and a homeless guy stopped me. He told me I was really pretty. I told him thank you. He asked me if I would marry him. I told him no. He asked if he could have my water bottle. I told him yes. The art of the negotiation. Start big, end small. We were sitting in my car at a red light. She goes into her purse and pulls out a page from a magazine or catalog. It's a ring and she tells me she wants me to buy this ring for her. A promise ring if you will. I ask her why. She says because we're going to get married and this is the ring she wants. Not even a will you marry me but you will marry me. She wasn't a very good Jedi as I said no, I'm good thanks. We had been dating for 3 weeks and that was the last night. I had left my ex due to the fact that he cheated on me with both men and women. And every time he would get too drunk, he would confess to me that he was gay. He was distraught for weeks and asked me to meet him in person to talk, so I agreed. He proposed to me in the McDonald's parking lot and I said frick no. I'm a high school teacher. In my last 2 weeks at my last school, a pupil half-jokingly asked me if he could stay in touch maybe through Facebook or something. I said it would be inappropriate if we were friends on Facebook, unless we were family. He then made a ring out of paper and proposed to me in front of the class. We made a real thing out of me saying no. He said he wanted all his Rugrats DVDs back and wanted visitation to see my pet chinchilla. It was all in jest of course, but it's probably the hardest and longest I have laughed in my 6 years of teaching. It was a moment that will stay with me forever to remind me why I do what I do. His younger sister, who I also taught, committed suicide 2 years later. It makes me incredibly sad to think he may never be that carefree, fun-loving and mischievous young man ever again. Well, that took a turn. My husband was at a Target one day and saw this guy get down on one knee at the entrance and proposed. The woman apparently looked at him and then walked right back out the store. The relationship was over for a long time. Webeth knew it. He thought a marriage proposal would help. It did, in a way. I was proposed to first thing in the morning when I saw him on the bus. I was dressed as an elf and he was 9. That kid knows what's up. Because we were in Vegas and just wanted to get married as a tourist attraction. If you get married here is not legal, she said. I'd already told him no in private. Our relationship was on the rocks and it was clear he thought this would automatically solve the problem. Always order your relationships neat instead of on the rocks. I was on the beach in Nice and a guy who had been following my small group told me he was a chess player and asked me to marry him. I said no. So he was that nice guy. We'd been dating a week. He went on to sabotage his next girlfriend's birth control, married her, and then cheated on her with anyone he could. He sounds like a well-adjusted adult. Has anyone said yes because they didn't want to embarrass themselves in public, and then shortly later they told them that they meant to say no because they didn't want to cause a scene? I have witnessed a failed proposal in public. It was the most embarrassing crap I ever saw in life. Ever since I saw that, I'd make sure that I would never propose to a girl in public. I wanted to propose to my wife at our favorite pub on New Year's Eve, right as the ball hit zero, with her sister and her sister's boyfriend in attendance. She somehow got wind and put an absolute stop to it. She did not want to be proposed to in public, and made it very clear she would say no in as public a manner as possible if I still did it. So I delayed the proposal 2 months until the end of February on our Valentine's Day date. I had been out of town for 2 weeks starting on the 13th. Took her out for dinner, then took her to our favorite spot on the mountain that overlooked the entire city and the lake and the cruise ship, and did it there at midnight. Public proposals can be really tacky if not done right, or if you don't know your partner. Wow, you were very lucky she found out about it. Sounds like something her sister might have done as a favor to you, but good on you for respecting her wishes. My then boyfriend was basically completely mentally unstable and abusive towards me from being an alcoholic stoner, in that if he didn't have weed he'd be completely intolerable but would have spent the majority of his paycheck at the bar he worked at. He was talking about how one day we'll be married, and how he wants to save up for a ring. I sort of cringed. One of the first times I realized how deep I had become in that relationship and how unhappy I was. He got super upset and starting saying, well, what if I ask you to marry me right now? I wanna marry you. I just shrunk into myself. We were in a parking lot and it was awful. His dad proposed on his behalf, ring and kneeling. Son was in his mid-20s. They were complete strangers. I was 11. This needs more explanation. My girlfriend's boyfriend before me proposed to her. It was at her favorite park. So really, it was a nice proposal. The problem was it hadn't even been a year since they started dating and they were having problems at the time. She clearly saw that they weren't working and wanted to break up. He pretty much just wanted someone to raise his daughter for him. She broke up with him and had to drove him home while he cried. He then threatened to kill himself. He's now married to someone else who he proposed to after only a few months. It was by a man. I'm also a man. It was by my best friend. We were not in a relationship. I am not gay. He is not gay. It was a complete joke and he was only doing it as an April Fool's prank to embarrass the absolute crap out of me. He made a massive scene and didn't care. Afterwards he found it hilarious. I did not. Gotta call his bluff next time. Say yes. Get excited. Go in for a kiss. He proposed in a grocery store when I was 15. I didn't know him and this grown butt man walks up to me and says, you remind me of the Virgin Mary. Would you do me the honor of marrying me? Couldn't find my mom fast enough. Because I was a 14-year-old tourist at the time, and I live in Bosnia, and I don't want to herd goats for a living. Joke's on you, he ended up marrying a 13-year-old who helped him create the wealthiest goat farming operation in Europe. She's a billionaire goat breeder now. Because I thought Publix was a strange place for a proposal. I was 16, at Ozfest with my then boyfriend, ran into my weird, creepy, full makeup Jagalo 17-year-old cousin who I hadn't seen in 5+ years in line to get in. Cousin attempted to propose in line. I gagged and had to hold back angry boyfriend. He was my only cousin. Now when people ask, I tell them I have 0 cousins. My friend went to London for her college exchange program and had a beautiful love story with an English guy. Then came back and they were talking on Skype almost every day for a year. She started having second thoughts and he asked what he could do to fix it. She told him to come to Brazil so they could see if the magic was still there. He booked a flight the next day. After 2 great weeks together, he was even more in love and she decided she should move on. She took him to the airport and he proposed right at the gate. She said no and left. Brutal. Wow, what a freaking flight back. Nothing to do but sit uncomfortably and stew in your emotions while in close proximity to tons of people so you can't cry or let anything out. Because I was relatively sure she was gay and we were 18. A decade later I was positive because I watched her marry a lady. A guy my friend had known from work for about 1 year invited her to lunch. She assumed as friends because he had a girlfriend for the entire time my friend knew him. Anyway, they went to O'Charlie's, and he started telling her about how he had found Jesus. Apparently Jesus came to him in a dream and told him that he and my friend were destined to be together. So he got down on one knee in O'Charlie's and proposed. She declined and GTFO'd. Because I am a PSW and he was a client of mine. He was quite low functioning and had Down syndrome. Absolutely adorable kid. He was 16. All my co-workers were married and one day he asked why I'm not married. I said because I hadn't found anyone special. We were out walking in a mall and he yells, I'm special. Will you marry me? It was amazing and hilarious and I said absolutely not. I'm so glad there was one cute story here. Because it happened a month after we started dating. The full boil. Because I was in an actual relationship with someone else. And I was also 16 years old, and the proposal was my 30-year-old coworker. A restraining order was eventually filed. Late to the party as always. We'd been friends for about 3 years and I finally agreed to give him a chance and go out with him. He showed up at my work after 2 dates. When I'd told him the night before I thought we were better off as just friends. He spent $8,000 on a ring, made a spectacle of himself, and refused to leave my workplace parking lot after I said sorry. No, the police had to be called to escort him away. I was actually the one who was rejected. Asked my second grade math teacher to marry me. She must have thought me out of her league and said no. My sophomore year of college we were playing charades in Italian class and I got the word for to get married, so I proposed to my professor. She just turned bright red and laughed, but never said no. We were in the food court at a local mall. It wasn't even the good mall. It was the ghetto one where everyone was loud and unruly. But I digress. I was 20 and 8 months pregnant with his child. We were discussing an argument we had a few days prior that resulted in me leaving. Afraid of him and his temper, he showed up in a suit and tie, handed me a ring that his mom gave him, and when I asked, "What's this for?" he slithered out of his chair onto his knees and asked me very loudly to marry him. I've never heard the ghetto mall go so quiet, and the place was packed. I said, seriously? Here? He took it the wrong way and began gushing about how yes, he was serious, how marriage could fix us before the baby came. He doesn't mean to choke me a few days ago. He's sorry. I had to walk away. I was embarrassed and wanted to melt through the floor. I left him there on his knees, angry. He screamed to me, "Fine, be that way you be, yike." I should have grabbed my Chinese food though. Only regret. He doesn't mean to choke me a few days ago. He's sorry. At least he said that in front of witnesses. Give them a little bit of backstory when they tell this to the gossip mongers. Because she was an old lady who had no idea who she was. Dementia. We had gone on 3 dates. I was Mormon at the time, so that wasn't entirely unusual. He was really shocked and hurt because I guess he thought 3 dates was plenty of time to know we should be together. Dodge a freaking bullet. The ol' LDS lightning round dating. I was working as a barista at a Target Starbucks. A young guy came in and hastily exclaimed he was doing a scavenger hunt and if he could please get a photo of the two of us with him proposing. My co-worker flat out said that was weird, but I was like, yeah, whatever. So I walked out from behind the bar and he got down on one knee, and it was then I realized I hadn't thought this through, as people in the dining area and who were in line for coffee and hadn't heard the preceding convo immediately gasped and slightly crowded. It wasn't a huge crowd but enough that I felt bad. The guy immediately turned red and asked, and I cringedly said, "No, because you didn't even buy a frappuccino." He laughed. A few in the crowd gasped, then confusingly chuckled, walked away nonplussed. His friend said he wished he had videoed that instead of just taking a pic, and everyone went their separate ways after he gave me a thank you hug. It was pretty fun. Because when you're recovering from crippling social anxiety and your boyfriend proposes to you at the Trevi fountain surrounded by applauding people, it makes you question how well he knows you. I once saw a guy propose in a restaurant where he had a fancy violin player come into a not so fancy restaurant. Perkins. He made a big scene, and she said absolutely not. They both left soon after. It was super uncomfortable. However, my friend told me his co-worker saw the same thing that same weekend at a different restaurant. So either two guys had very poorly thought out ideas, or someone was making a prank video. I search YouTube for it every now and again, but never found it. I'd do a public proposal, only after we were already engaged, trying to get all the free champagne and dessert we can. Yo, it's like a birthday scam, except everyone feels good afterwards. Because it was used as a manipulation tactic. I had an abusive ex who 100% wanted to do this. Partially because she believed it would fix the relationship, but it would also put her in a good light if I said no in public. Most people don't know the dynamic of the relationship, and if someone proposes and the other says no, well, then that seems like a dong move and inconsiderate of the proposer. Never mind that the relationship might be abusive and that this is another tactic used to make you look like the bad one that the proposer so generously tolerates. Never mind that the relationship is on the rocks and this puts public pressure on you to say yes. Just another form of freaking manipulation. Honestly, if I see someone propose in public and the recipient of the proposal says no, I think poorly of the proposer, because it's clear that they've massively misjudged the relationship, or the person they're proposing to, or they're a manipulative butthole. Because it was a homeless guy who asked me after my mom turned him down. It was in front of both sets of parents, and it was the only time in my life, before or since, that I literally heard a voice in my head. The voice said "No. You have been spotted by the rare flying floofer. If you comment good boy below, he don't steal your hot dogs anymore. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.